Hello everyone, this is Daughter Darkness, and today we've got the first proper video of the new beginning for my channel. But for today we're sticking with fairly familiar territory, that is Kingdom Hearts, and specifically I will be ranking my top 8 Kingdom Hearts games. This is a video I've actually done before, but it's been a very long time and my views have changed and the reason behind them have changed, so now's a nice time for a bit of a refresher. As a bit of housekeeping, Kingdom Hearts 0.2 does not feature on this list because it's just far too short, far too limited for me to really make a proper comparison with any of the other games. And in all cases, I will be counting the most up-to-date version of any game, so that's final mixes, remakes, remasters, all of that sort of thing. It will be the best version of the game that will be counted. In cases where a single entry is told over multiple different versions, for example with Kingdom Hearts Key, where we've got the browser game, the mobile game, and back cover, or in the DS games case where you've got the game and the movie which adds a bit more, I'll count them all as a single entry together. So without any further ado, let's get started. So in number 8, it will come as no surprise to anyone who knows me, it's 358 Days Over 2. And honestly, this is the only game on this list that I don't like. The other games might have their issues, and there are things that I don't like about them, but as a whole I like them, apart from this game. Now, in terms of gameplay, it's fairly uninspired. It's pretty much a very limited version of like a Kingdom Hearts 1 style battle system. The limit break thing is okay, but then you've got irritating enemies like some of the other handhelds do, but you aren't broken, so it just makes them even more annoying. And in some cases it can just become extremely tedious fighting a single enemy, like Ruler of the Sky, who I remember when I first fought him, I think it took me about half an hour and I didn't even die. The story is the saving grace of the game. It's pretty good. I don't love it as much as most people, but I will say that those final few days from about 352 onwards, they're done very well, and particularly the scene with Roxas and Xion at the end, where she, spoilers, dies. Those scenes are done really well. It's just a shame that the rest of the game didn't do a good enough job of making me care about these characters. But of course this is the game where we finally get to see the great battle where Roxas defeats Riku. Oh. But yeah, everything up to that is tedious, and it just makes the game just a bore to get through, and the movie is just as bad because it's effectively people eating ice cream and talking about work for 3 hours. So 358 Days Over 2 gets onto my list at number 8. At number 7 we have what might prove to be a bit of a controversial choice, and that is Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories, which I understand has gained a bit of popularity over the years as people have kind of come to appreciate the card-based battle system a little bit more. But I'll explain a bit why I don't like it so much. So story-wise, the game is very good. It's nice to see a different side to Sora, and in her absence, it strangely enough allows us to appreciate Kairi a bit more than any of the games that she's actually in ever do. And it gives a good highlight on Riku's relationship with Sora, with Darkness, with Ansem, and all of that sort of thing. And it is interesting, after Sora, Donald and Goofy have obviously become such good friends, that the cracks start to appear while they're in Castle Oblivion, tested under the most trying of circumstances, but then ultimately they will come back to Sora and help him. But where the game really falls down for me is, well, everything else. The card-based battle system I think was an interesting idea, and I think it works well for the most part, but I've kind of found that once I've got to know it, it's fairly easy to break, and then it just becomes a matter of reusing the same slates over and over, and occasionally doing a bit of basic addition in your head, to make sure that you can get through any boss really. None of them are particularly challenging once you've worked out the game. And with all that, I think it would be a bit more interesting if the environments were a bit different, but all the worlds are basically the same thing. Firstly, they're all the same worlds with one exception, as Kingdom Hearts 1 had, But other than that, they're basically reskins of the same world as you're going through the game, because it's all done through map cards, and that just makes everything really dull for me. There are concepts here that are good, certainly, and it's not a bad game. It's probably not the second worst game in the series, but it's just this stuff just kind of makes it feel a little bit tedious for me. In a different way to 358 Days Over 2, I think there's just a little bit too much repetition in this game. And as far as the remake goes, I think it's very well done. It's pretty much like for like, but it doesn't really do anything to get rid of any of the flaws of the original game, and potentially adds in a couple more of its own by adding in even more overpowered slates. So that's why Rechained of Memories gets onto my list at number 7. And in number 6 we have the game that everyone loves to hate, that I actually don't mind so much, and that's Recoded. This game, I think it's just very okay. There's nothing that amazing in there, and there's not really anything that bad in there either. The gameplay I think is fun enough, it's stimulating enough for the relatively short runtime of the game. The command deck, interestingly, is probably more well used and fits into the design of the game a little bit better here than it does in any of the other handhelds. But the gameplay is still quite limited and it's still fairly bland. The mini-game things that they have to throw into every world are a bit hit and miss. Some of them are quite fun. I quite like the rail shooter thing in Wonderland that they do, but like the turn-based thing in Olympus, I don't mind it so much, but it does start to wear a bit thin after not all that long. The story, I think it's serviceable. I don't think it's awful, I don't think it's bad, I don't think it's great either, it's just there. It does have some quite nice moments though, and therefore I don't have anything against it story-wise. A 3-hour movie of it in 2.5 is much better than the Days movie on account of stuff actually happening throughout the runtime. But yeah, I think Recoded, as I've just said, everything is okay. There's nothing great, there's nothing particularly bad, so it gets onto my list at number 6. And moving on from the game that everyone loves to hate to the other game that everyone loves to hate. That is Kingdom Hearts Key / Unchained Key / Union Cross / Kingdom Hearts Key back cover / whatever you want to call it next update. It is an exploitative pay-to-win mobile game that's really the core of this thing, and it's still quite fun. I still quite enjoy playing it, and I tend to log in every day. In the last 2 years since it released, it's probably been the Kingdom Hearts game I've played the most, because it is strangely addicting to try and get the best medals possible, even when you're going through this really horrible gambling system to get all of these medals. It's obviously not really to the same standard of the games that come above it on the list, but I still have a good time when I play. The constant updates keep me interested, and mean that there's always a bit more to play. But story-wise, this is where things get a bit more interesting, because the story of the original Key was really good. I really liked it. The sort of mystery unravelling slowly over the weeks kind of worked quite well. And I think back cover did give a fairly good recap of it without doing that much more on top of it, and that was great. Since we've got the new Union leaders and it's Union Cross and all of that sort of thing, it's hard to really judge the story now because it's basically just everyone getting together and saying hi at this point. But I'm still somewhat interested, not as much as I was probably before, but it's okay. As far as back cover's concerned, as I said, it doesn't really add that much, it didn't really answer any questions, but it's still by far the best movie out of the 3 because it's actually fun to watch. And it gave us the Master of Masters, who is one of the most entertaining characters that I've ever seen in a game series. So yeah, that's it for Union Cross. I can see why it's the game that everyone hates, but I still quite enjoy it. And the various Key games come together onto this list at number 5. Right, now we're getting into the games with a little bit more substance, because number 4 on my list is Birth by Sleep Final Mix. In this game, I think there is a lot of potential that wasn't really delivered on, both in terms of the story and the gameplay. Although story is definitely the strong point of this game, it doesn't quite work for quite a while for a few reasons. I think the 3-story structure is really to the detriment of this game because it just carves up the interesting stuff and makes it really awkward to go through as you're sort of experiencing a third of a game 3 times rather than just playing a game. and it makes it difficult to really, I don't want to say difficult to follow the story, but difficult to properly follow it the way it's intended to, because you sort of know some stuff from later on when you're doing the early part of a second story, and it just makes things a little bit more awkward. And the three protagonists, none of them are particularly great. I think Terra's the most interesting, but it's still not really anything that hasn't been done before, with Riku better. However, Xehanort and Vanitas I think are good as villains, and the way that Ericus kind of causes all the trouble by being so pro-light was an interesting way to do things, and the story as a whole is pretty good. And the secret episode in particular is great. I think Black Points is one of the best scenes in the whole series. As far as the gameplay goes, it is completely broken. The command deck is very badly utilised here, as it gives you a handful of commands that you can just walk over all other enemies with. On top of that, you've got shot locks, which you can basically do the same thing with and charge up extremely quickly, and you can use them 20 times a minute if you want to. Everything is a breeze, despite the fact that most of the enemies are horribly broken as well, i.e. Mysterious Figure, who is the worst boss in the series. However, I would say that I do find a bit of enjoyment from the growth system. I think the command melding, it's actually quite fun to go through. It's quite an interesting way to do things that, as much as it probably hinders people who want to do like level 1 runs and that sort of thing, it is quite fun to get most of your abilities through commands, try out various combinations, even if most of us use a guide anyway. It's still fun, even if you end up only reverting back to a few commands that you use over and over again at the end. So it's a fun game that doesn't quite live up to its potential, so it has too many issues for me to put it any higher, but Birth by Sleep Final Mix gets onto my list at number 4. Right, so now onto the other game that seems to be increasingly disliked by most people, and yet it's my favourite out of all the handheld games, and that's Dream Drop Distance. The PS4 version obviously being the most up-to-date version and the best one. That's the one I'll be talking about here. Now, gameplay wise, basically just copy and paste everything I just said for Birth by Sleep and put it here. In terms of unbalanced combat, the command menu again is completely broken, although this time it's mainly just one command that's much more powerful than all the others, i.e. Balloonra. And the bosses are just as bad, if not possibly worse on average, although I would say none of them are quite Mysterious Figure level. However, I do just find it more fun to play than Birth by Sleep. I think part of it's probably just the fact I'm playing as two characters I care about. It's still not really close to the top two, but I do think it's better than any of the others. The flow motion is a bit clunky, but it's fun to use, and I quite enjoy the pet simulator aspects of the Dream Eaters, and that's basically where a lot of the gameplay goes for this. It's not particularly good, most of the stuff is not really executed that well, but it's still quite fun, and that's the way I see it. And the worlds, I think, are really good here. They're quite empty, but then this was being made for a 3DS and a tiny 240p screen, so the actual level design of them I think is interesting, and it uses flow motion quite well. Using your abilities in interesting ways to get you around the worlds, it's something that I quite like in this game. And as for the story, well, this is where most people will say the story fell off the rails, and maybe they're right, but I actually quite like the story. I quite like time travel as a plot device, I must admit, and I think it sets up an interesting final confrontation for Kingdom Hearts 3. So I'm not particularly bothered about the fact that it's in this game. Riku's story is probably the highlight here, but I do quite enjoy Sora's side, especially towards the end when you see, like, the dream within a dream that he goes into and everything's all distorted and he sees Roxas and everyone else like that. And Sora's character tends to be quite heavily criticised here, but he still has some really good moments.
You treat people's hearts like bottles on a shelf. But they're not! Hearts are made of the people we meet, and how we feel about them. They're what ties us together even when we're apart. They're what make me strong.
And as a whole, yeah, I would say this is deeply flawed, but I still find it a lot more fun to play than any of the other games that go behind it, so Dream Drop Distance gets onto my list at number 3. And now we're into the top 2, and these two games are really the ones that make the series as good as it is. And these are the two console numbered games, obviously, and in number 2 I think it's fairly clear, even if this game is still great, number 2 is Kingdom Hearts 1 Final Mix. It's obviously important being the first Kingdom Hearts game, and it was the first one I played back in 2003 or whenever it was that I first got it, and it's the reason that I became a fan of the series. In terms of gameplay, it's fairly basic, but everything there works fine. It's pretty solid, mostly well designed. Some of the bosses edge on the more annoying than interesting side, but I think the worlds and going around them are probably the best in the series. While the platforming mechanics are not the best thing in the world, I still think it's fun to go around the world using them. And the different puzzles and that sort of thing, particularly when you get to Hollow Bastion, just make going through the worlds a very fun time in this game. On top of that is obviously the great soundtrack, which I haven't mentioned up to this point just because the soundtrack is amazing in all of these games, so it's not really a very good comparison point. In terms of the story, this is Kingdom Hearts at its simplest, and possibly its most effective, because it is a very good story that allows the main characters, Sora, Donald and Goofy, to grow and become closer as the story progresses, and I think that's really the highlight when I go back, is seeing how distant they were from each other and then how close they become by the end. As well as having some really great moments like Sora's sacrifice and that sort of thing. It's just a really solid and nicely written story, and it is a really great game. There are a few teething issues, but on the whole it's still great. And if the number 1 game hadn't taken most of what's here and expanded on it, this would definitely be really hard to beat. Either way, Kingdom Hearts Final Mix gets onto my list at number 2. So, number 1, and it will come as no surprise, it's Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. As I said before, it takes everything great about the first game and builds on it, particularly in terms of combat. The command menu is expanded on, giving you so many more options that are pretty much all useful at different points in the game. The various limits, the summons, the drives, all of them have their uses at different points. Different fights require different strategies. You have to think on your feet quite a lot, and it just makes this such a great action RPG. The best experience is obviously on critical mode, where the fights are going to force you to do more than just, well, mash X, as a lot of people tend to choose to do in action games before complaining that it's all you do. The experience is really exciting throughout because, with a few exceptions, the bosses are really good. And the secret bosses in particular are so good to go through because they're difficult, but they're completely fair for the most part. So it's actually about you learning how to defeat them rather than just overcoming stupid stuff, as it is in, say, Birth by Sleep. The story, I think, is also really good. The best in the series probably alongside the first game. It maybe doesn't use Disney worlds within the plot quite as well as the first game, but it introduces new characters that I really enjoy seeing, the organisation in particular, as well as Roxas and Namine, and the game has a nice bittersweet ending that could be ruined if they decide to bring back characters in future games. If there's one major flaw with this game, I think it's that the worlds and the world design is a little bit too simplistic. You're effectively just running from fight to fight. There's not that much in the way of traversing the world that's much more than just running and gliding once you get it. But as the combat's so fun, this isn't that much of a problem, so it's fairly obvious. This is my favourite game of all time. Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix gets onto this list at number 1. So that's it for this list. I hope you enjoyed seeing my countdown. Please consider putting your ranking list in the comment section below the video. And while you're down there, please like this video if you did, and please look forward to future content about Kingdom Hearts and the other stuff that I've mentioned. So that was all from me, so as always, thank you for watching.